What's going on, man? T Miller, what up, baby? Adam Finkelstein, he's an ESPN recruiter on the boys' side. What's going on upstate? C Webby, what's going on? Hey, mama. I'm not a Mets fan. It's New York and it matches my Knick gear. What up, champ? Brewster Hoops, what's going on? Jason, is that you, Jason, running the IG for Brewster? JJ, what up? Coach X, how you doing? What up, Ron? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Ron Golson, what up, baby? National Grassroots B-Ball Network, thanks for joining. Where you based out of? Okay. talking to Adam now, trying to get him right. Roy, what up, man? Okay, we got Adam on now. So I want to introduce you guys to Adam Finklestein, ESPN recruiting analyst, great guy, helps kids all across the country. Want to welcome him to the Positive Podcast show. Let's get it going. Adam,
What's up?
how are you?
Healthy,
Good.
so I can't complain. How about
Nah,
you?
you can't. Nah, I'm the same. Thankful for the little things right now, man.
Yeah, I tell you what, you had the right idea. I should have worn a hat. This is getting out of
Hey,
control.
nah, it's not good, man.
Yeah,
I know barbers can't wait for this to be over to start making
no
some money
doubt,
again,
no
man.
doubt.
So thank you for coming on, man. I appreciate you taking out the time to come and chop it up with us about basically all things recruiting, man. Um, so let's jump right into it and talk
Sure.
about how you got into it. Like, did you play basketball growing up? Like, what led you to the game?
So I'll give you the abridged version of the story, but basically, I was a coach. I was when I got out, I was a manager at UConn. The 4 years in between the national championships, so they won in '99 and in '03. I was there in between, and then after that, I knew I wanted to coach. And it's funny, I wanted to walk on at UConn, but I wasn't good enough. I mean, that was the heyday UConn when
Absolutely.
everybody, I mean,
Absolutely.
it wasn't happening. So, I've told this story a few times. Tom Moore, who's now back at UConn as an assistant coach, had been the longtime head coach at Quinnipiac. He got me to be a manager because he knew I wanted to coach. And he
Okay.
just said, and he basically said to me, he said, listen, this is hard and it's kind of a thankless job, but don't quit talking about being a manager. And if you don't quit, we'll get you going. We'll help you down the road, and it'll be the birth of your coaching career. Long story short, I quit. So so, but even that though, I tell you what, he was right, because even the year that I was there, it really gave me a bunch of opportunities. I got into the AAU world after that a little bit. I coached took a volunteer job as a Division III assistant after my graduation. Did that for a couple of years, and then I just kind of hustled. Back then, it was all about like working camps, and
Mm-hmm.
and then I got hired at the University of Hartford. I was 24, and at the time, I was the youngest Division I assistant coach in the country who had never played college basketball.
Right.
So it's crazy that was now, almost coming up on 16 years ago.
Right. Now that's crazy. So you're coaching at the University of Hartford.
Yep.
How long were you there at the University of Hartford?
Just a year. We got fired, to be honest.
Okay.
So it was one of those things that, like, I knew I was joining it at a pivotal year,
Mm-hmm.
joining the program. But when you're in my shoes, when you're a 24-year-old who never played and you've got an opportunity to go, and initially I went as like the GA/Dobo.
Right.
And I went and, didn't get paid, worked kind of again for free most of the summer, worked guys out. And, I mean, there's hundreds of guys trying to be a college coach, and there's hundreds more trying to get to the Division I level. And so if you don't care how the odds are stacked against you. You're jumping at it. So that's what I did. And that year I was there, I worked for Larry Harrison, who's now been the associate head coach of West Virginia, with Hugs for a long time. He was with them at Cincinnati back in the day as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that year, Coach won coach of the year in the America East. We finished third in the conference. So, we thought we were turning it around.
Right.
But we got that's the early lesson about the business. We got let go there, and that kind of, it was at that point that I knew I wanted to stay in basketball, but I wasn't so sure I wanted to coach. I didn't really want to relocate. My family was in Connecticut. My wife now, my girlfriend at the time, I knew we were going to end up together. Her family was in Connecticut. So that led me to explore other things and kind of took me down the path that's led to where I am today.
So obviously, you love coaching, and one door closes at Hartford, but obviously another one has opened for you. So talk to us about how you kind of got into the scouting and into the media world.
So when I was at Hartford, we had a big kid named Kenny Adeleke, and Kenny was a great player. Was a player of the year that year in the conference. Got a couple of the awards. Albany had a really great guard that year too. So I think they to be honest, I don't even remember who got. Kenny was the best player in the league in my opinion. He might not have gotten the award, but he was the best player. Mm-hmm. And we had NBA scouts there very consistently. He and Paul Millsap were the two leading rebounders in the country, and it was always 1/10 of a degree that separated. So we used to I've never met Paul Millsap, but I used to hang his rebounding numbers in Kenny's locker every day, trying to get him to chase him. So I got to know a bunch of NBA scouts that year who came to scout Kenny, to do due diligence, and that was kind of the first road I went down. So after we left Hartford, I had a couple opportunities to continue coaching, but I was really intrigued by the scouting piece, and specifically, at the NBA level. And I joined what was then called an apprentice program run by the late Marty Blake. He was the director of scouting for the NBA, and his son Ryan Blake, who now runs the family business. So for 2 years, I would go to Division I college games, sit with the NBA scouts, write up my own scouting reports, and they'd be distributed to all 30 NBA teams. And so that allowed me to kind of develop this craft and really just gave me an opportunity to learn, because you're sitting with these professionals, every night, and you're having an opportunity to pick their brain and at the same time, I started what was a very close friend of mine, named J.R. Hargraves. He used to be a big-time AAU guy back in the day. He ran Connecticut Basketball Club. Was known as CBC. They had Andre Drummond and Chris Dunn and a ton of other guys. Well, he had this business idea for what became the New England Recruiting Report, and he kind of pitched it to me. And so when I left Hartford, I was kind of moving forward on two different fronts. JR and I were starting this New England Recruiting Report, and I was also exploring the NBA scouting. I was even coaching at a prep school because I just didn't really know what was going to stick. Right. And so I was, in retrospect, I think one of the things that I've been most fortunate to experience is as I've gotten to experience so many different avenues of this business, from coaching to scouting to media. And so that, went down that road and was exploring all three different things. And the media side of it really took off. I had another guy who kind of took me under his wing was Jeff Goodman at the time. He was transitioning out of prep school basketball and kind of needed somebody to hand it off to. So that went hand in hand with kind of where we were in New England. And that's the root of it.
Right. So talk to them more about what NERR is all about, because you have different platforms with it. Not only do you have the recruiting report, but there's also events that you'll have for it, for kids to get exposure. Yeah,
to be honest, it started, back in the day. This is, NER is we're wrapping up our 14th year right now. And back in the day, it was, we intended it to become a paywall site. That was the initial business plan, is we, like Rivals was doing back then. They had all those fan sites, and we thought, all right, there's nothing like this in New England. We can get a bunch of traffic. And then I'd never written before. And so it was just kind of, it was hard at first, to be honest. It took a lot of time. And because you're just trying to get something coherent out there, and then you're trying to edit yourself. And there were a lot of days where I'd get a text and said, hey, you misspelled, this, and this. So, but what we found almost by accident is that it turned out to be a better kind of marketing arm for exposure events. So I mentioned Jeff Goodman earlier. He and I ran that first year. We ran this event that we called the Elite 75 Showcase, and it was invite only. It was the top 75 kids in New England, and we got everybody. And so that's, that has since, I mean, Jeff only did it that 1 year, but that event has kind of become the flagship event of that business, and allowed us to really become a brand of events where we've got things at different ages. And as it's grown on, and then, it was about 5 years after that, I got on with ESPN, and then I had to bring in other guys to help with NERR because my focus couldn't be solely in New England anymore. So, like right now, Zach Sandberg does a terrific job for us. We've been very lucky to have a lot of guys, have a nice little pipeline of guys who've helped out and gone on to college jobs, which is something that I'm really proud of as well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So you're with ESPN now, and for everybody who's joining in late, we're talking to Adam Finklestein from ESPN. Welcome to the Positive Impact Podcast. So you got the NERR, and then you said you got on with ESPN. Explain to the listeners out here, give me a day in the life of a national recruiter, because your base is in the Northeast, but how do you know the best player in Cali, and then you got the best player in Texas and the best player in Florida? So what is a day in the life of Adam Finkelstein?
To be honest, it's changed, because when I was first with ESPN, I was on a team of, I think it was 6. I mean, it was myself, it was Paul Biancardi, it was Joel Francisco, it was Reggie Rankin, it was Mike LaPlante, who was a longtime Division I head coach, it was John Stovall. And so it was a big team, and everybody kind of had their home base. So I was initially the New England guy, and then it became clear I needed to become the Northeast guy, so I needed to expand my horizons and become like equally adept at New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and down to the DMV as much as I could possibly do. And initially I went down and was really trying to have a handle on all the way down through Virginia. And then I quickly realized, like, all right, there's now for ESPN at the time, all I needed to know was the Division I guys. It was just a matter of like, all right, if they've got a Division I offer and it's a real offer, we've got to get them in the database. We've got to have them graded. And at the time we had the right evaluations for each kid too. Right. So that was the job. And it was really, the priority obviously went to the seniors. So, and so that was it was very much like a regional format at first. Now over the years, that group has become much smaller, and we had Dave Tellep join us for a while, and then it was a huge group, and everybody, again, it was very much kind of like a funnel where Paul and Dave would handle the national stuff and everybody else would handle their own region. And then that's evolved over the years. I'd say it was about 5 years ago when our team started to get a little smaller, where I had to take on more of a national role. It's a much smaller group right now. But so basically the way I view it now is if I have to have an opinion on guys when it comes to national rankings, but I still view that Northeast region is the one where I've got to know that, I've got to stay true to my home base, but I've also got to know those guys for national rankings. So when we go, like if it's a sneaker circuit or it's USA basketball or stuff like that, I will really prioritize guys that I haven't seen as much of. And then in those other weekends, those traditionally slower weekends, I'll be very active kind of locally within my Northeast region here.
Awesome. So when it comes to, a New England recruiting report or the rivals or whatever the case may be, what makes yours reputable as opposed to the Terrell Dozier scouting report? Because like it seems like a lot of times, like everybody.
You have a scouting report?
No, I don't. But I'm just
okay.
No, but I'm just saying, like, like everybody can have like Jalen Green #1, like, what I mean, like the obvious thing. So maybe you change a couple of kids based on opinion, and you say, hey, listen, and you get a website up, which is very easy these days, and say, listen, I got the Terrell Dozier scouting report, and
Right.
Adam doesn't rank the kids right. So talk about like what makes yours reputable, because there's a lot of people who put stuff out there, and it's not, basically it's just everybody knows the same people.
Yeah, and I think, well, first of all, I think there's a lot of people that do a good job. What I can tell you is what I try and pride myself on. And the first thing is just being candid. The amount of I'm trying to think of trying to think of a different way to say either BS or fake news, but the amount of just junk that fills this space that's just totally inaccurate. Whether or not maybe it's malicious, maybe it's not, but it's just not accurate is incredible. So the amount of misinformation that fills this space is off the charts.
Right.
I think the biggest challenge to this, and here's my thing, is like, my goal is not to appease any kid, AAU coach, high school coach. My goal is just to be candid about what I see. Right. And the people who I feel like I don't want to say I work for, but the people whose opinion matters most to me are the college coaches. So I'm not going to say, if I don't think I put out a tweet, I think it was yesterday. I think it was about Isaiah Todd. And it was, I got a little like thing for that. And they're like, ooh. And I was like, no, I'm not trying to be have a hot take here. I'm just trying to be candid. And that, I think, and whether it's in, now I do think you have to be very cognizant of the fact that you're talking about kids. So the younger and how impressionable they are and how much this whole thing weighs on them. So I think I should say the person who does an incredible job of having perspective on that, Paul Biancardi, has an amazing kind of way to, keep that at the forefront of what we're doing. And I've really learned from him in that area. But I think just being candid, and it's not to say that I'm always right. Certainly not. I don't think anybody is. It's just that you're going to hear what I really think. And when it comes to evaluations or rankings, one of the things I tell people pretty frequently is it's impossible to be right. Like, no matter who's doing the rankings, no matter who's doing the projections, you're going to be wrong about something. So you long term, when people look back, so it's impossible to be right, but you can be wrong. Like in the moment, it can be very obvious if you haven't seen a kid, or if you're not really that knowledgeable, or if you're, falling for like the fake offers or all that stuff. So you're going to be open to a certain amount of public criticism, and that's fine. That's the name of the game. But I think that you have to, if people know that you're doing the work, that you're in the gym, that this is your own opinion, it's not for sale. And it's not, it's not going to be, you're not going to be bullied or anything into that, then I think that's all you can hope to provide.
Absolutely. So I want to shout out a couple kids that just got on. August Mahoney, freshman at Yale University. Samir Torrance from Marquette is on here, and probably one of the best shooters I've ever seen, Danielle McGlure from Rutgers. Thank y'all for joining in. We're with Adam Finkelstein talking recruiting. So you made a segue earlier for me, talking about Isaiah Todd. So I just want to talk about the recruiting landscape today. You know what I mean? Like I got a lot of friends that are coaches. I got, a lot of guys who are in the AAU, and, I talk to them all the time, specifically my guy, Terrell Myers, about kids today, recruits today compared to when we were recruited back in the early 90s, you know what I mean? And, for me, I was like, I feel like there's a sense of entitlement. Obviously, like social media has played a big role in kids recruiting, the sneaker circuits, you know what I mean? Like all this stuff plays a major role in recruiting these days. So like, what kind of things are you looking for? Like when you're evaluating talent, you know what I mean? Like, what is it that you're seeing in today's recruits compared to recruits that you saw back when you first started out?
Well, the thing that I'll say, I mean, you hit the nail on the head with social media, and I think the potential pitfalls are just get more and more prevalent as you know, this goes on, and
Right.
social media has become such a trap for so many of these kids, and playing for whether it's, you know, likes on Instagram or what, I don't even know what the heck TikTok is, but I hear that's the new thing. So I don't even
Yeah.
know how that works, but
Yeah.
you know, I mean, what I've seen is that it's, and the shame of it is, I mean, and right now I'm talking about the real high profile kids.
Hmm.
Some of these kids get so seduced by that, and it's such a trap
Hmm.
because every year, if you look at it from like a historical perspective and try and look back on, let's say, all right, you're going to go back and you're going to look at all the 5-star guys, and you're going to
Hmm.
say, all right, all these guys had a certain level of talent, but
Hmm.
now let's try and figure out why some of them made it and why some of them didn't. It
Right.
almost always comes down to their perspective and their habits. Like
Right.
their talent at that early starting point, it was high enough so that if they, you know, it's very rare. Like, this is one thing I really push back on, like oh, they missed on that guy. He wasn't as good as people say.
Hmm.
Like, no, Josh Jackson was every bit as good as we thought. You know what I
Absolutely.
mean?
Absolutely.
Like he was the best. You know, I still say he was the best player in the, like, you know,
He was
he
good.
was
Nah, he was
he
good.
was good, and guys who are NBA stars right now in that same class were downright scared of him.
Yeah.
And so, like, so did we miss on Josh Jackson? Clearly, he's not now what we thought he would be. But I
Absolutely.
don't but I don't think we missed on his talent. I think everybody, you know, there was consensus about his talent. I'm using Josh. Josh is a pretty
Right. Yeah.
notable example. I just used him in an ESPN story
Hmm.
about guys you quote unquote missed on the most, and I was super high on Josh, which is why I'm using him as an example. But
Right.
I think that in any case like that, like when you go back and you try and say, all right, why did these kids not live up to their potential?
Hmm.
9 times out of 10, it is tied to the habits and the maturity and the
Hmm.
ability to kind of block out all that noise and all those
Hmm.
distractions. And I mean, like, social media is such a huge part of that. And realize that, like, hey, none of these guys, I don't care who you are right now, but if you're in high school, you haven't done anything yet. Like, you haven't made any, well, you haven't gotten to the NBA. You haven't, you know, like, you haven't made a career yet. You know, I mean, you have a huge opportunity in front of you, but it's still the first, you know, it's the first lap of the race. And
Right.
so those are the guys that's one reason why, like, Cade Cunningham in this class, like, I'm super high on Cade Cunningham. I don't
So am
know,
I.
you know, I don't know that he's got, you know, he may not have like the explosiveness of some of these other guys, but he's as mature of a high school kid as I've come across in a long time. And
Yeah.
so, like, I guarantee you that kid's going to be a 10-year pro. Like, you
Yeah.
know,
He's good.
cut the highlight in case I'm wrong. But if
Nah, he's
if
great. Nah, he's good. Nah, I agree with you on that.
and his mind, his maturity level is off the charts. Like, that kid's already got a pro type mindset. He doesn't care about, you know, I mean, there's a kid who could legitimately complain to me about his ranking. He doesn't say anything. He's friendly
Right.
and outgoing, and,
Yeah.
you know, that kid's gonna make it. You know what I mean? Other guys who get worried about stuff that is really insignificant in the grand scheme of things, easily distracted, prioritize the wrong things. Those are the kids that, from a historical standpoint, really, you know, more often than other guys, don't live up to their potential.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I need you to, so here's my biggest thing right now with this whole process. So I really need you to explain to me and probably some other people that are on here right now. So the first thing that bothers me today, and what's up, Isaiah? Isaiah Stewart on University of Washington.
High character. He's a pro.
He is a pro.
12
He's
year
gonna be a
12
pro.
year pro. 12-year
Absolutely.
pro. No doubt.
Absolutely.
High
Thanks for
character
coming
kid.
on. Thanks for coming on, big fella. We got to get you on the show, man. So here's my first thing. My first thing is everybody's blessed now to have an offer. Everybody's blessed to have an offer. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So that's the first thing because it's on social media. So I said when, you know, when we were coming up, we played against guys, but we had no idea where they were going. It was just like, oh, that kid was good. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
So
Right.
now it's like, oh, so let's say for instance, we did know, like, we had social media back in the 90s, and we knew that a kid that I felt like I was better than is going there. I might go to my coach and say, well, how come he got an offer from there? How come nobody's here to see me? So that's
Right,
my
right,
first.
right.
That's my first thing. When you're blessed to receive an offer, are they really getting offers? You know what I mean? Explain what an offer is to everyone,
So
including me.
it was 7 years ago that for ESPN I wrote an article about this very topic. And on my kids, I have it sitting in my phone right now because I'm about to tweet it out again. I usually tweet it out like every year or two, because especially right now with what's going on in the world, like I see the same kids getting offers every day, and these coaches haven't watched them play. Like they're like 80% of the offers I see right now, this time in particular, are just not legitimate. And what it speaks to is the fact that that kid's AAU coach has a relationship with that kid's college coach. It has nothing to do with that college coach's evaluation of that kid. 8 times out of 10 right now. So I'm getting ready to share that article again, because essentially what it was is because 7 years ago everybody was still counting offers. But what it was is it was a series of situations where I tell stories about, there was one situation. One story was a Big East head coach. I was standing there watching a game with him. I think it was at Live in the AC. That was like a new event back then. And he was watching a kid, and he says to me, "This kid's pretty good. Who is it?" And I say, he's whatever. And then I said, "Haven't you offered him?" And his answer, and this is a Big East head coach, he looked at me, he says, "Oh, hell, I don't know who the hell we offered." And I'm just like, and it wasn't like meaningful for them. There was another one where, college coaches can't publicly comment on kids. So you have AAU coaches. There was an AAU coach back in the day who just used to blatantly lie. Just would tweet things like, my player just got offered by this school. Well, that is like very literally incorrect. And I would always, I'd get texts from college coaches who'd see it on, Twitter was around back then, who'd see it on Twitter and say, "That's not true. We didn't offer that kid." But they can't say that publicly because it was a violation for them to talk about prospective student athletes. So there was nobody to kind of hold that. So that was another example of the whole offer thing. So, and we went down, and there were a few other stories along those lines. But I think the bottom line is that an offer is not a tangible thing. It's not, it's sometimes it is, but I think that, offers are fluid. Some are legitimate, some aren't. And I think that, we talk way too much about it. It's not really what's important. What's important is who wants you, who's recruiting you, where could you go right now? And if a coach has never seen you play and he calls you up and says, I'd like to offer you, say, well, I'm ready to commit. Would you, and see what they say then. If they hit the brakes, you don't have an offer. I mean, we used to say on August 1st, after the July Live period was over, I used to tell people, if that coach didn't call you, you don't have an offer anymore, because no coach is going to call and say, we're taking your scholarship offer off the table. They're just going to stop calling, that's right. So these, a lot of people treat offers as these tangible things that you can collect, and that, they're like poker chips that never go away. Well, that's not how it works.
Right. So do you think part of it is like, okay, let's say for instance, like Sienna's in the MAC, okay? And I say I'm blessed to get an offer from Niagara. So Niagara's in the same conference. Does that now make, do you do it?
Oh, yeah.
Sienna and St. Peter's and Manhattan, like, oh, shoot, they offered him because we don't want to lose out on a kid.
Right.
That might be the MAC player of the year. Like, so is
right.
that part of it as well?
Yeah, well, there's certainly copycat offers all the time, not specific to Siena or Niagara or anybody in the MAC, because I think both of those head coaches in particular are rising stars. But I think there's copycat offers all the time. But I also, like you hear high school coaches, or you see high school coaches on social media saying, when you ask who else is recruiting them, that's code for I can't make my own evaluations. And to a certain extent, I think that's true. But it's also code for I'm not sure I can trust the information this high school coach is giving me. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's
Yeah.
it's a little bit in between. And the college coaches got to do their due diligence. Their boss is going to ask them who else is recruiting them.
Right.
So I think the ideal scenario in there is somewhere in between. The college coach who does their due diligence, who knows what the marketplace is like for
Right.
that prospective recruit, but still trusts his own eyes and his own due diligence, no matter what anybody else thinks.
So coaches in other programs do investigate, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, do coaches in the same conference talk to one another? Like, so
No, but
would
every offer is on Twitter these days, or
right.
social Twitter or Instagram, and they are locked into that. They have to be locked into that. I mean, I heard there's a
Right.
great story about another MAC head coach who is only followed verbal commits, and every time somebody would get an offer, he'd like text his assistant and be like, "Who's this kid?"
Yeah.
And it was like, and the staff, they were like, "Oh my God," like,
Yeah.
so that stuff happens, I mean,
Right.
that's how I mean, it's an information game, and you've got to pay attention to who you got to pay attention to who your league is recruiting. And I mean, it's just, you can't change it. It's just, I go to an old Bill Belichick-ism, like, the rules are what they are. You just better understand them so you can use them to your ability to the best you can.
Right. So now a kid gets an offer, or whatever the case may be. Like, I feel like kids are taking the sexy offer as opposed to taking the time to choose the right school and like really do the research.
Yeah.
And I
Right.
think I saw something on Twitter today that Zag said there's 781 kids in the transfer portal
Right.
today.
Right.
And for me, it comes from, I think kids are choosing the wrong schools for the wrong reasons. Like, you know what I mean? And what is your take on, on kids choosing schools in the transfer portal?
I think there's a variety of variables at play at that. I think one of the things with the transfer portal is the potential for these kids to be immediately eligible next season if that rule change takes place. I think that's one reason why you're seeing the inflated numbers. I think some people, when I've done some of these interviews over the course of the last week, I've heard a lot of people trying to, correlate the transfer portal to the pandemic. And I'm not really sure that relationship is as strong as the one from the increased transfer portal numbers to the potential to be immediately eligible. And I'll give you this example. The amount of guys who, I don't know the numbers on this, but what I see on the list myself is a ton of kids who are rising seniors who only have 1 year left who are transferring now. And it used to be those guys didn't go because if they had to, they had to sit out and then they graduate. And even if they have another year of eligibility, well, that's a risk for the school taking them because they could potentially leave right away next year after they graduate and be immediately eligible somewhere else. So there's a lot of risk in that. Correct. So the amount of rising seniors I see in the portal, to me, is a very strong indication that they are banking on this rule changing. The other thing I'll say is it's just, in my mind, it's we've seen it in AAU and high school for years. I mean, how many high school players do you know that haven't changed schools or AAU programs throughout all 4 years of high school? I mean, it's a very small number. Right. And everybody's got the right. I mean, I transferred in college, so I'm not, I wasn't a player, but I was looking for a better situation too. So I think everybody's entitled to that, but I also think that the people who, whether it's basketball or whatever, the people who have a willingness to kind of fight through adversity and figure out how to make the best of any situation are going to have the best experience, because it's not always going to be smooth sailing, no matter whether it's a college basketball player or anything. Right.
So we're in an unprecedented time right now.
Yeah.
So, we're talking about, no AAU, so there's no, what happens for these kids now with grad transfers and transfer portal? What's happening? What's going to happen with the 2020 unsigned seniors? Is like a lot of kids are going to have to now go to prep school, or like, what do you think is going to happen as far as recruiting is concerned right now?
Well, I think one of the trends that I think has already kind of revealed itself is the kids who were probably going to wait out the spring. A lot of them have already committed. So what I mean by that is the kids who maybe have low to mid-major offers, but we're saying, you know what, I want to play at a higher level. I'm going to play AAU again. I'm going to see what I get in April. We've seen a lot of those kids, more of those kids than usual, at least in the Northeast, because I admittedly don't monitor low to mid-major kids outside of the Northeast. If it's outside the Northeast, I'm really only concerned about guys who have the potential to be ranked nationally.
Right.
But in the Northeast, what I've seen is kids who were going to play this out make a commitment to the school that's kind of been with them longer, the school that they have the relationship with, the school that maybe they've already been on campus for. So I think that's one tangible thing that at least in my region I've seen. I think in theory, there's a lot of kids who are going to need prep school because of the pandemic, and because of the number in the transfer portal. They don't have the same opportunities they would have had normally. And so they might need that extra year. But candidly, there's a lot of unknowns along that route too. I mean, the economic ramifications of this pandemic on prep schools and on tons of entities is still very much unknown. But there's going to be some prep schools that are in very serious trouble. The amount of money that prep schools are able to allocate to potential basketball prospects may be very different. I'm not convinced that everything is going to be 100% back to normal next prep school season. I hope and I pray it will, but I don't, I haven't seen a scientific model to suggest that that's a foregone conclusion. So I think there's just a lot of unknowns, quite frankly. And that's why my advice to kids almost always, but especially right now, with the signing period beginning today, is if you have an opportunity to secure a free education, take it.
Absolutely. That's always the advice. Not even about now. That's always the advice.
Yeah, absolutely.
So talk to me about, obviously, like, in order for coaches to, to first look at you, you got to they got to think that you have some talent. Let's just be honest. Like, it might it might not be all about talent, but I think that's got to be it. If I think this kid is talented enough to play for me.
Right.
So if I feel that way, let's talk about grades for a second. I got some kids on here I got some high school kids on here right now. Let's talk about how grades play a major part. And does it turn coaches off right away, or how does that work for coaches?
Well, I think most of these schools have a very defined academic metric that they have to fall into. Obviously, the clearinghouse has their standards, but there are certain schools and even certain leagues that have, whether it's the Ivy League and their academic index, the Patriot League has a certain level one. So there's a lot of places where lots of times the academics aren't the coach's decision. They're standards that the coach has to kind of operate within and has no wiggle room. Now, he might have wiggle room within like if you're an Ivy League coach and you've got to hit a certain average with your class, well, you can decide who you're going to go low on and who you're going to go high on. So if I take somebody who's just over the Ivy League floor, he better be my best recruit. And then I got to find either one or a couple other guys to balance him out. So I don't mean to say that it doesn't impact it at all, but I think that lots of times the academic, limitations that these coaches have to operate within are not of their own. They're requirements either by their school, their league, or the NCAA eligibility center.
Okay, good. And then and then talk about, like, are most of the kids, like, you see, maybe not nationally, but around like New England, let's talk about the Division II and Division III level, because I think a lot of kids kind of like turn their nose up at a Division II scholarship, or playing on a Division III level, where for me, I feel like, we just got to get kids going to college. And, I mean, like, kids are so caught up in in D1 and, whatever. It's like, nah, like, because like you said, we want you to go to school for free. Like, the NBA is even smaller than, smaller of an opportunity than even a Division I scholarship. So, there's so many good Division II and Division III programs out there. How do we get kids to, like, look at that, and be realistic about the level that they should be playing at on the next level?
I'll share this story. When I mentioned I was a prep school coach. My first year there, I had a kid who was a good player. He was a young senior. He had an opportunity to go to he had an opportunity to go to Amherst College, which is, typically one of the top three liberal arts schools in the country.
Absolutely.
And then he had a very low major, I'm not going to say the name, but a nowhere near the same caliber of academic school that didn't even offer him, wanted him to go do a post-grad year because he'd never repeated,
Right.
for the potential that they could offer him afterwards.
Right.
And he was about to do it until his parents, and at the time, I think I'm 26 years old at the time. So his parents come to me and say, you got to talk him out of this. Like, he's throwing. So I said to him, I went to him the next day and I said, listen, you can do whatever you want, but I need you to do one thing for me before you make up your mind. And he said, all right, what's that? And I said, I need you to go research the average starting salary out of Amherst College and the average starting salary out of this other school. And
Right.
2 days later, he comes back, and it's kind of, he walks in, he's kind of already pissed before like the conversation starts, because it's like, so, and it's, I was like, did you do it? And he gives me the answers, and I said, so where are you going? And he said, I'm going to Amherst. And he didn't speak to me for 2 weeks, like he was pissed. But now he's living on the beach in Malibu, and we laugh about it when I see him. So that's so I think the point is this, is that even Division III, where there's no academic scholarships, there's still a lot of benefits to be had. First of all, it's a far higher level of basketball than most of these kids realize, because they've never been to the game. Pretty much everybody on a Division III roster was the best player on their team. You get to some of these top leagues, where it can help you get into prestigious academic schools. Amherst is in the NESCAC. It's a phenomenal academic league. That and the UAA, where you've got some of the most prestigious colleges and universities in the world, where being a basketball player can help you be admitted when you probably otherwise wouldn't, because there are admission slots that are set aside for athletes. So now being able to play basketball might not get you a scholarship, but it does get you a tangible spot to a extremely prestigious academic institution, which can set you up for the rest of your life. And by the way, those prestigious academic institutions usually have the biggest endowment, which means they have the most competitive financial aid. So so that becomes a factor too. Division II, I'll give you another quick story. When I was at Hartford, our league in the America East had a below 500 record collectively against the NE10, the Northeast 10, which is a Division II league. Because everybody played them, but our league lost more than they won that year, because that's how good Division II was, and I think still is in a lot of. Look what Merrimack did this year. Merrimack won the NE10 last year as a Division II school, their first year in Division I, and they win the NEC. So if that doesn't speak to how good Division II basketball really is, I don't know what does. So I think kids need to educate themselves on the quality of the competition. And most importantly, again, getting back to this same sentiment, like, block out the noise, try and make a mature adult decision, not about what's going to get you, the most, credibility right now, but about what's going to set you up best for the next 40 years.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, let's talk about, we talked about AAU, but let's talk about camps too.
Okay. I saw that down there.
Yeah. So people want to know, like, I had a kid that went to, Hoop Group has a ton of sessions. I feel like, sometimes, like, there's a lot of kids there, you know what I mean? And everybody's there looking for the exposure. So he was a high honors student in school. We sent him to the Hoop Group Academic Elite Camp. And I found that at the Academic Elite Camp, the players there were his level. You know what I mean? And so he got more love there. He got more looks there. And, the coaches that were there were high academic schools there. He wound up going to Babson College, which is a great Division III school, got a great education.
Who was the player?
Marcus Edwards was his name.
Okay. Did he won the national championship at Babson? Was he on that team?
No, he left. He got out of there in like 2012. So
okay.
That. Yeah, he was before that. So
gotcha.
And so now, a lot of colleges have these elite camps.
Right.
So what happens when, what explain what an elite camp is as well. So is an elite camp if my kid gets a
I gotta
invite
go.
to
This was fun. This was fun. Thank you. Good luck. Stay safe.
you know what I mean? So if they're inviting my son to an elite camp, I'm saying, oh, is my son being recruited by them, or do they want $75 to play against the 5 kids that they're bringing in that they're really recruiting?
Uh, it depends on the school, to be fair. I mean, I think that there are everybody's got an elite camp because it gets, listen, if I were a college coach, I'd have an elite camp. How? But I do think different schools operate their elite camps in very different ways. Sometimes it is strictly a for-profit venture and that's all it is. It's not about choosing their roster. It's not about but in other schools and other places use it as a very legitimate evaluation tool where they can dictate the situations they see a prospect playing. So what I would say is I think anytime you try and paint like a broad category of something with one brush, you're going to be ignorant to some percentage of that population. So rather than saying all elite camps are bad, that's not accurate. But what I would say is before I signed up for all of them, because by the way, if you got a $75 elite camp, well, that's pretty cheap relative to the market right now. So a lot of these elite camps, especially the Ivy elite camps, I mean, those are hundreds of dollars. And there's some kids that spend their whole summer literally spending thousands of dollars just going from one of those camps to another. So my message to those kids would be like, listen, if you got it, you got that kind of disposable income and you just want to make sure that you get every look possible, God bless. But if you can't, if you have to be a little bit more selective with what you do, I would just do some due diligence about how many people on their current roster attended those camps, how many of those kids had offers before the camp, or how many of them picked up offers while they were there. And I think you'll find out a lot about how serious they are about you relative to how they answer those questions. If they're if they brush you off or they don't take the time to answer, well, it's a pretty good indication of what they think about you. But if it is an authentic evaluation tool for them, then they'll probably be very happy to share that with you.
Absolutely. So before we wrap up, I always ask some questions, some lightning questions, first things that come to your head to get out of here. And in your line of work, so my first question is, best high school player you've ever seen?
We just did this I just answered this question. So when you say that, like Kevin Durant is the best guy I've ever seen in high school. Now, he wasn't the best guy at the stage. What I will tell you, though, is so Kevin Durant, best player I've ever seen, ended up being the best player I ever saw at a very early age. Best player I've seen at this stage is honestly Imani Bates, the young kid now. He's better than any – right now he's better than any kid that age I've ever seen.
Absolutely. I heard a lot of good things about him. Best team.
Ooh.
And this is in your years of scouting.
Yeah.
Not ever, like, you know what I mean? So.
Yeah, that's geez. I'm gonna get somebody mad with this. There was, I mean, that takeover team that won, what was it, the first or second EYBL? Those teams that won. I wasn't quite as familiar with them, but I know they were just a powerhouse. I'll say this, the best team that I got a really good look at, there was a BABC team back in the day that had like Nerlens Noel, George Niang, Wayne Selden, Jake Lehman. There was a couple other pros on that team. It was like 5 or 6 guys that ended up being pros, and that was as good of a team as I had seen that I got a chance to see like on a consistent basis.
Okay. So now I want you to give me your top 5 high school players by position.
Jeez. Right now?
Whenever.
Like guys who just at that time, that's how good they were?
It's in your years of being a recruiting analyst.
Okay. All
Name.
right. So some of the best guys I've seen, like I said, Amani Bates has got to be on that list.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Honestly, I'm gonna Harry Giles got to be on that list
Okay.
before he got hurt. People don't
Yes.
even remember how, and he was an equally like great kid. Like that guy was like Chris Webber and the nicest kid you'll ever meet. I
Yeah.
mean, Harry's gonna be my starting five. Let's see, my four man. We're probably gonna put maybe like Ben Simmons in there somewhere.
Okay. Okay.
Um, the backcourt. Let's see. It's the best guard I've seen. Um, Tyus Jones was a bad boy in high school.
Okay.
Like we knew he could, like he wasn't like a great shooter back then. He's still not a great shooter, but
Mm-hmm.
he was like a magnet, and that's why he got all those kids to go to Duke with him.
Right.
Because he was the one. He and Harry were real tight. And he brought Justice Winslow in that group too. So
Mm-hmm.
I'd let him run the point for me. And then I need a shooter, so I'd have to give some thought to who my shooter would be.
Okay.
But that's where I'm going to start though.
Okay. Jalen Green, does he go to the G League or is he going to college?
I am admittedly not one. I'm not really, fortunately, I'm not one to. I've never been like, we don't do the crystal ball thing,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is like a great tool for fans. But as somebody in the industry, I'm glad to not have to do that because I don't want to have to like blow up a kid's spot.
Right. Right.
Now, I don't know where Jalen is going. I think it's down to pro or one other option.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see tomorrow. And I do think, the thing I'll say about Jalen started out, he was a top ranked prospect when this class debuted at ESPN as an ESPN 25 3 years ago. He was great. Then he kind of lost it. And he's making a heck of a case to end up because his rate of improvement over the last year has been really special.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Adam, man, I definitely appreciate your time coming on here, man. So stay safe, keep your family safe,
Tell
and we
Rel
will
we're not answering that question, Rel. We're done. We're done.
Oh, man. Thank you so much for coming on, man. I appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Follow us
Yeah,
at Positive Impact NY.
stay safe, everybody.
All right. Take care.
All right, thank you.